The west coast of Greenland came into clear sight of our port bow at 10 minutes before 6 o'clock. The riddle of what waited for us north of Walrus Bay briefly subsided in my mind as the forbidding Arctic landscape passed silently beneath us. Of the manifold lands and eras that I have crossed in my travels, the endless panorama of glacial desert has always remained homogeneous to my perception. Whether it is ice that crowns the Earth's northern pole, cradles its southern pole, or envelops it completely, it always meets my gaze with a countenance of solitude and perdition. The only variable among these frigid frontiers is the light that hits them and the kaleidoscopic dreamscapes it turns them into. Frozen canvases washed in brilliant colors that paint the visions of Rourke and Van Gogh. But in this instance, there were no vibrant colors adorning Greenland's glacial cliffs, only the shadow of the clouds. Cold air always makes me very aware of my clockwork heart, chilling the metal in my chest and reminding me of the sacrifice I had to make against Vicky's despotic regime. The distant growls and grunts of corpulent walruses met our ears as the Hysteria sailed over Walrus Bay. As a precautionary measure, we opened the vents on the tertiary boiler and shrouded the ship in a veil of steam to conceal our presence. Lytton cut speed to slow ahead, reducing our velocity to match that of the average cloud, as we would appear to any skyward glances. It was decided that Oft, Lily, and I descend in the longboat ahead of the Hysteria, whilst Lytton, Ilsa, and Augustus take the ship over the coordinates and wait for our signal before proceeding further. The three of us were generously equipped with the necessary tools for facing the unknown. Oft had brought his patented Kingsley Crybaby sonic cannon for primary assault and defense, 2 Colt revolvers as secondary sidearms, a belt of pressurized steam grenades, and his magnetic grappling hook gun, the one shaped like a shark's head. Lily had taken her favorite oversized wrench, a large hand cannon, and a standard electro-incapacitative rifle. I had armed myself with my trusty God-steel cutlass, a high-caliber pressurized blunderbuss, and of course my steam pneumatic electro-graviton impact hammer, or Mad Hammer for short. In addition, Oft and Lily each took a short-range radio communicator. I did not need one, as my topper serves that function. The three of us boarded the longboat and cast off through the veil of steam. The bay beneath us stretched for an approximate square kilometer, from the water to a glacial shelf gradually sloping upward to form a valley containing the walrus's enclave. We flew to the eastern side of the valley and landed on an outcropping of the glacial shelf and set to climbing over the sloping ridge, leaving the longboat under the vigilant guard of the walruses. Lily remarked that she thought this was a bad idea, but I knew from experience that you can always trust something with a mustache and tusks. When we reached the apex of the slope, we saw that the ice stretched out in a plateau to the limits of our sight. However, we spotted what appeared to be another depression in the ice, much like the one we had just ascended, approximately half a kilometer along the coast. But instead of the sound of grunting walruses and the smell of Arctic fish, from this distant valley our senses detected the sound of heavy machinery and the smell of industrial smoke. We advanced towards the edge of the valley until we could vaguely make out the presence of a settlement of some kind. I took my spyglass from its pouch on my belt and peered through into the distant lowland. The settlement that I perceived through the glass could have been nothing but a special operations base. They were not drilling for anything, nor training special military recruits, and there was no form of ether harvesting mill. I could make out a row of small bunkers along the northernmost wall of the cliff, each flying the Union flag atop their roofs, undoubtedly the living quarters for the residents of this secret station. To the left of these bunkers was a larger building with an arched roof, identified as an airship hangar by the 3 Imperial warships that its open gates revealed inside. On the side of this building was a small booth, with a tall Tesla coil atop its roof. Evidently a communication station. Opposite this, on the western side of the valley, was a massive edifice that could be nothing other than a factory. 2 large billowing smokestacks rose from its roof. The sounds of titanic turning wheels and pumping pistons echoed from within its walls. It stood with its back to us, obscuring any doors or gates from our sight. Oft, looking through his binoculars, mentioned that he had once worked in a similar-looking factory, manufacturing parts for electrical dynamos. Opposite the obscured front of this factory, in the very center of the base, was a large iron platform about 200 by 100 meters in area, upon which was a structure I could not identify. It was a vast, dark metal dome, about 50 meters in diameter, and half that in height. Adorning the shell of this odd structure were what resembled Tesla coils or Van de Graaff generators, long cylindrical towers with vast metal spheres atop them. There were 9 of them arranged in a cross formation upon the dome, 4 about the rim extending at a 90-degree angle, 4 above them at a 45-degree angle, and 1 on the very apex of the dome. Undoubtedly, this was the subject of the base's secret operations, but its purpose perplexed me. Perhaps it was some form of experimental energy conversion machine, but this could not be confirmed at such a distance. I was about to hand the spyglass over to Lily when a dark shape on the opposite side of the cliffside caught my eye. Adjusting the sight on the scope, I looked closer at the shape. I recognized it, and I immediately felt nauseated. It was an airship, Zeppelin class, 3-deck hull, black envelope, with steel frame armor, dual stern propeller, custom automaton drop hatch. Adorning its envelope was a coat of arms set before the Union flag. The crest depicted a castle turret engraved with the shape of a serpent. Oft cursed it when he spotted it. He handed his binoculars to Lily, and she cursed as well. It was a vessel that I and the Hysteria had encountered many times before. The Phantom, personal airship of Count Cuthbert Salazar. Long before the war began, Cuthbert Salazar was a colleague of mine at the Royal British Academy of Science and Engineering, a relatively clever man from a wealthy aristocratic family of continental descent, with strong ties to the crown. Salazar was an automaton engineer who unfortunately often found himself in my shadow. Whilst designing automata was his livelihood, it was more of a side hobby for me. Yet my endeavors in the field exceeded his by far. Privileged and entitled as he was, he became jealous and vindictive of me. And when the National Scientific Injunction was passed, he got his chance for revenge. Salazar joined the scientific resistance despite his family's royal connections, and went underground with us. However, he kept his true agenda hidden until opportunity arose. Long had he been tracking our movements and learning our secrets, quietly whispering them into Queen Vicky's ear. When the resistance fled to Seaforth Island, he remained in England, and used his family connections to gain an audience with Vicky. His betrayal led to the crushing defeat that ultimately scattered the resistance into exhaustion. Vicky rewarded his serpentine duplicity by appointing him as the head of the Royal Ministry of Science, and restoring his ancient family title of Count. Since then, he has been Vicky's diligent lackey, her ludicrous taxations funding his laboratories and private army of automata. It seemed all too fitting that he be the minister supervising Vicky's Arctic operations, whatever they were.